Chapter 2. The Tightening Noose. Everybody knew the Nazis were anti-Semites. They hated Jews. But the idea of mass murder in our modern 20th century seemed outrageous. Many Jews, my parents included, tried to wait it out. It is so difficult to leave your home for an unknown country. Soon, they told themselves, this would be over. The Nazis did not invent anti-Semitism. This hatred of Jews had been alive for many centuries. Jews had been targets of attack all over the world. But one of the areas where the hatred was especially strong was in Central and Eastern Europe, from Germany to Poland and Russia. Here, Jews had been forced from their homes, their businesses, even their countries many times before Adolf Hitler came to power. Jews were accused of killing Christ. They were hated because some were successful in business and had become wealthy. They were blamed for many of the evils of the world when there was no one else to blame. Sometimes they were hated simply for having been born Jewish. Some of the strongest anti-Semites were also, quote, good Christians. Martin Luther, the 16th century German who started the Protestant religion, called Jews the Christians' most vicious enemy. Luther urged his followers to destroy Jewish homes and synagogues. "Let us drive them out of the country for all time," he said in a speech. Still, many Jews continued to put their country ahead of their religion. They thought of themselves as Russians or Poles or Germans first, and as Jews second. Helen was a young Jewish girl living in Frankfurt, Germany in the early 1900s. Her mother was German. Her father came from Lithuania on the Baltic Sea. Mother's relatives had lived in small villages in southern Germany for many years. Since there were few Jewish families in these towns, it was hard for young Jews to find marriage partners. So, as her older sister had done, my mother came to Frankfurt. Father had arrived here at the age of 9 when his parents and sisters fled their home in Lithuania. Like hundreds of thousands of people, they were escaping the pogroms, the killings of Jews, that were then going on in Western Russia. After Mother and Father met, it took 5 years for her to say yes to marriage. At that time, German Jews considered themselves better than Eastern European Jews. Mother worried that marriage to a Lithuanian might not be the right decision. Because Father was a foreigner, without German citizenship papers, they could not be married in Germany. So, although it was not proper for an unmarried couple to travel together, Mother and Father set out for London. There, they were legally married. Immediately, they returned to Germany, and 9 months later, I was born. Frankfurt in the early 1900s was a vibrant, exciting German city. It lay east of Alphon's home in Wittlich, about 60 miles, across the Moselle and Rhine rivers toward the center of the country. Helen spent her entire childhood here along the River Main. Offenbach was the city of her birth, and across the river was Frankfurt, an important harbor, birthplace of the famous poet Goethe, for whom the city's great university was named. It was a European center for books, business, and banking. Germany was Helen's homeland. Frankfurt offered the city life that she loved. There was so much to do: go to concerts and plays, share good books with friends, hike and picnic in the forest nearby. I was a happy teenager, like my girlfriends, with one exception. After high school, I went on to the university, something my mother never understood. She wanted me to get married as early as possible. My future husband, she said, must be German Jewish and rich. One summer, Mother found the perfect choice for me. He was 32. I was 16 and absolutely not interested in this old man, so I behaved in an obnoxious manner. I did not want to get married then or later. I wanted to study, maybe teach. I wanted to spend the evenings with my friends. We liked to discuss politics, go to horse races, and irritate our parents by wearing very unattractive clothing. A few years later, after she had been working and saved some money, Helen took a vacation trip to the North Sea. There, on her own, she finally found a young man who seemed right, but the idea of marriage raised problems with Siegfried Wolfarth's parents. He was from a strict Jewish family, much more religious than Helen's. His parents did not like the fact that her father was Lithuanian. Worse yet, it looked like Siegfried would lose his job, which meant he could not support a wife. In April 1933, the Nazis had announced a boycott of Jewish shops. No good Aryan German could buy at a store owned or run by Jews. No good German could see a Jewish doctor or Jewish lawyer. Jews, Hitler proclaimed, would not be allowed to teach in public schools or work in government jobs. Before we could make definite marriage plans, Siegfried, under the new laws, lost his job. And after 3.5 years at the university, I had to quit my studies. There were now no Jewish teachers. Siegfried's mother could not understand why, under these conditions, we would want to get married. She called it a most unwise decision and told us she could not give her permission. Yet, against the advice of his parents, we continued our plans. Convinced that I would impress them if we talked in person, Siegfried arranged a meeting. I was invited to the family home one evening. After serving tea and pastries, Siegfried left me alone with his mother while we talked. I was polite, but firm. Finally, I told her, "I'm sorry you cannot agree with us, but remember, Mrs. Wolfarth, that whether you want it or not, I will carry your name until the end of my life." As it turned out, this was not to be. Helen and Siegfried decided on a June wedding in the Romberg, Frankfurt's centuries-old city hall. But when Helen's father learned that the Wolfarths were against the marriage, he was furious. "Whoever does not want my daughter, for whatever reason," he announced, "does not have to eat my food." And with that, he cut Siegfried's parents from the guest list of the dinner party he had planned for the young couple. Immediately after the ceremony, Helen and Siegfried began making plans to leave Germany. Conditions for the Jews were getting worse every day. Siegfried had a friend, A.G., who was going to start his own metal business and wanted Siegfried to help him. Since A.G. was also Jewish, he planned to open his company in the Netherlands, where Jews were still treated decently and could own their own businesses. For a country that wanted to be rid of Jews, the Nazis sure made it hard for us to leave. We had to fill out a huge number of forms. There were legal papers, tax records, bank accounts, and endless lists of furniture, books, clothing, and household goods. We were allowed to take only a small amount of money, so we decided to spend it before we left. How we splurged, buying things like a refrigerator and a vacuum cleaner we didn't really need. Moving day finally came in June, 1 year after our wedding. While we finished packing, 2 guards watched over us constantly. They were checking to see what went into our large wooden boxes. Another guard went through every book. Everything about the move was very difficult, but the hardest part was saying goodbye to our families. There were our parents, my 14-year-old brother, Siegfried's younger brother, and all our friends from childhood. When, if ever, would we see them again? The Nazi noose was tightening. On September 15, 1935, Hitler's government made the swastika an official part of the German flag. But another darker event took place that day. It was an event that brought to an end all hope for fair treatment of Jews in Germany. The Nuremberg racial laws were passed. These laws made it very clear who was a Jew. Immediately, all Jews lost their citizenship. They could no longer fly the German flag. German citizens of the Third Reich were forbidden to marry Jews. Many towns in Germany announced a new goal, to be Judenrein, clean of the Jews. The answer for many German Jews was to do what Helen and Siegfried had done, leave. During Hitler's first 2 years in power, more than 100,000 Jews fled the country. Very likely more would have gone, but few countries would accept them. Britain said it did not have enough room. The United States agreed to take 25,957 Germans a year, but it made such a strict rule for entering the country that fewer than half that number actually came. The United States was just emerging from the Great Depression. Many Americans were still out of work. They didn't want refugees from other countries looking for jobs in the United States while they themselves were still unemployed. The feeling was similar elsewhere in the world. And yet, 2 of the smaller countries of Europe, which already had more than their share of refugees, continued to keep their doors open to immigrants from Nazi Germany. One was Denmark, and the other was Holland. We moved to a small, modern apartment in Amsterdam. Both of us were eager to learn about our new country. But there was still a great difference in the way we adjusted. Siegfried had a deep love for Germany. He never got over his resentment that the Nazis had changed everything about his homeland. I, on the other hand, felt no roots. My home had been Germany, but it wasn't anymore. Where was my home? I couldn't say. Looking back, I think that was my happiest, but also my saddest years were spent in Holland. Parts of Amsterdam are more than 700 years old. Durable dikes prevented the ocean's constant attempts to seep into the land. 5 big canals crisscrossed the city in crescent shapes, with smaller canals jutting off to the sides. The many canals made islands out of the whole city blocks. Boats bustled back and forth in this busy trading center. It was a city famous for diamond cutting. The renowned Dutch painter Rembrandt had lived there. Now it was home to Helen, Siegfried, and thousands of other Jewish refugees from the Third Reich. Soon we met other young couples uprooted from Nazi Germany. Having friends helped to make our adjustment a little easier. Early in 1937, we learned that we could expect a baby in October. This news was a great joy, but money was a problem. AG could not give Siegfried a raise, and I could not get a working permit. In the bathtub one night, a solution finally struck me. I had made a friend, Ilse, who was a dressmaker. Ilse wanted to expand her business into something more elegant. She planned to rent a place in a fancy neighborhood where she could live, sew, and meet her customers. All she needed was someone to redecorate a nice apartment to suit her needs. Ilse wanted the place to be so beautiful that her clients would exclaim over it. Money was no problem, she said. Was she a princess or what? The next day I told Ilse that I was the person she needed. We agreed on a plan, and while she was away, I did the work. Both Ilse and her clients were delighted with the job. Using her place as a showcase for my decorating talents, I was able to start my own business as an interior designer. At last, we had an answer to our financial worries over the coming baby. It was on this project that Helen met a contractor and carpenter, Abe Rusnik, who would one day play a very important role in her life. Abe was a creative wizard and a great one with advice. 4 years later, when we had to make life and death decisions, Abe was first to offer us the advice we so desperately needed. He was always there with support and help, a true and faithful friend. From their adopted country of Holland, Helen and Siegfried watched the events of Nazi Germany with growing fear. On the 4th anniversary of his rise to power, January 30th, 1937, Adolf Hitler thumbed his nose one last time at the Treaty of Versailles. He declared that the German government would no longer make payments to the Allies. He demanded that all land lost by Germany in World War I should and would be returned. Yet in the same breath, Hitler announced, "Peace is our dearest treasure," graciously guaranteeing that Belgium and Holland would remain neutral countries. Der Führer assured the world that the leaders of the Third Reich had no wish for war. By September, the picture had changed. Hitler was now calling for Lebensraum, additional living space for his German people. Germany's farmlands, Hitler declared, were too small to guarantee an undisturbed, assured, and permanent food supply. He did not wish to put his people at the mercy of the German geography or to make them dependent on good or bad harvest for their food. The master race deserved better. Germany simply needed more room. Just where did he intend to get that room? Hitler did not say. But in the neighboring countries of Europe, people became more uneasy and less confident of Hitler's promise of peace. Nowhere was this uneasiness greater than in Holland. Helen and Siegfried, excited to be starting their own family, at the same time feared for the future of their unborn baby. At last, on October 28, 1937, our wish for a child came true. Our daughter Doris arrived. She was one of 4 little girls born to our close circle of friends in Amsterdam. That year, 5 happy couples with 4 new babies. By the end of the war, just 8 years later, only 4 of the 14 of us would be alive.